So this Dharma Talk is entitled Make Friends with Your Illness. And I'd like to share the introduction to Zen Master Dogen's Old Mirror, Kokyo chapter of the Shobogenzo, fascicle of the Shobogenzo. And I'd like to share a story from my teacher's life that is in connection with that story about the old mirror, and my own experience practicing with my teacher and how she worked with this old mirror, and draw some conclusions based on that. So that's the intent of this talk. So thank you first so much for your practice this morning. It's wonderful to hear Sarah on the voice. Did a great job, and it's just good to have us all together, especially this time of year when we shift the clocks ahead and people are thrown off a bit. The first paragraph of the Shobogenzo Old Mirror, Kokyo, reads, "What the Buddhas and the ancestors receive and keep and uniquely transmit is the old mirror. They are the same view, the same face. They are the same image, the same casting. They studied together and verified together. When a Buddha comes, a Buddha appears. When an ancestor comes, an ancestor appears." That's the intro. That's the intro to the old mirror fascicle. Zazen is like a mirror. It simply reflects our life and our thoughts without any judgment whatsoever. Generally, we're running away from the unpleasant and cling to the pleasant. In Zazen, though, equanimity emerges all by itself. Let me say that again. In Zazen, equanimity, the sense of not being pulled by the pleasant, not being repelled by the unpleasant, emerges all by itself through Zazen. And scary emotions like anxiety, depression, illness, death, and misfortune, all of these are reflected in the mirror of Zazen. The world judges us. The world judges us constantly. And we internalize the judgments of our parents as we mature into adults. We're inundated by judgments of society throughout our life, and that includes those internalized judgments. Unless we can see that even these judgments are themselves reflections, having no substantial existence. And when we can see that our judgments, the judgments that come from us from externally, the judgments that come from us internally, have no essence, no reality, that's transformation. That's the end of suffering. So I want to share a little bit about my teacher's, one aspect of my teacher's life. She suffered from asthma. She suffered from asthma the whole time I knew her, for the 15 years that I lived with her, but starting as a child, maybe some of you can relate if you have childhood asthma, and it just continued into her adulthood. It never resolved itself. And when she was living in Japan, she lived in Tokyo, in a big, smoggy city. And of course, that did not help matters. She found different ways of dealing with asthma. She had good luck with a acupuncture doctor that helped a lot, but the asthma never subsided completely. And her asthma was serious enough that she always had to have an inhaler with her. But here's the thing, when she ordained as a priest, she moved to a mountain temple. Noda Daito Roshi's temple, her teacher's temple, was in the mountains, and it was a bird sanctuary. The air was clean, and so she had no problems with her asthma there for the 15 months that she lived on the mountain. And after experiencing this asthma-free lifestyle for several months, she thought, I am totally content to live up here on this mountain until the day I die. So she had no intention on going anywhere. But one thing was missing from her practice, and that was Sangha, that was community. Her teacher was the only other priest at the temple. And that's not a balanced way of practicing. And as she continued to practice, her grandfather teacher, Daishin Roshi, he suggested that she begin training in a large temple with other women who were in a similar situation as her, just beginning their priest training. And it's expected in Soto Zen that we train at other temples with other teachers. That's a given. Especially if you're a priest in training, you want to have the perspectives of multiple teachers. And the purpose behind that is so that you don't get too attached to place or to teacher, because that naturally comes up. And Soto Zen is not a guru tradition. We don't pledge allegiance to a particular teacher. I'm not criticizing that particular way of practice, but because it is common in meditation cultures and in Asian religions to have that kind of relationship. But in Soto Zen, it's not that kind of relationship with the teacher. And so we have to be always on guard for getting too attached to one teacher in particular. And so Zen priests on purpose send their students out to other teachers to train with so they don't get too attached. And the other thing is that when you train at a small temple like she was, I mean, it was land-wise, it was a large temple, but it was small in the sense of it was only her and her teacher that were actually priests practicing together. And it's so beneficial to practice with multiple people for some period of time. It doesn't have to be forever, but generally we have these practices called Ango, which are 3 months long, and you go into a temple container with other priests, usually at least 15 other priests in training. And you're waking up together at the same time, you are eating at the same time, you're working together at the same time, you're sitting at the same, it's like a sesshin except over a 3-month period. But there's not as much sitting as you would do in a sesshin. There might be a sesshin within that ongo period though. There might be a sesshin every month in that 3-month period. And so for training, you're expected to do that anywhere, well, it depends on the person, of course, anywhere from 6 months to 2 years to 5 years, some people longer, just depends on the person and the needs and etc. And that container of practicing with other like-minded individuals, other priests, other lay people, because lay people also do this as well. It's not limited to priests practicing together in an ongo like that. And especially that's the case in the United States, where people who are not priests will train together alongside priests. I did that, and when I saw that, I witnessed that, I participated in that in Tassajara, which is in California, and there's majority actually in the United States are not priests, but they're doing these 3-month ongos together, especially, and it's a real it's a real gift to be able to do that for a 3-month stretch. And it's very difficult to get our life circumstances together enough to be able to do that, especially as a lay person, because you got a job, you got a family, you've got bills to pay, etc. So to get your life organized in such a way that you could actually practice in that way is itself a good practice. It's a good challenge. And I know some people that they're really serious. They want to do this. And I remember one woman, she must have been in her 50s at the time, and she said she had prepared 2 years. It took her 2 years to get to a place where, as a layperson, she could do a 3-month practice period at Tassajara. So people do it. It's just you have to have the drive. But as a priest, in some ways, it's easier because you've dedicated your life to it, and you've dedicated yourself to not having a particular home, abode, not having a space that you call mine. And that was certainly the case for my teacher at that time. But keep in mind, she'd been living on her own, in her own abode for over 10 years prior to that in Tokyo. So she had that experience as well, of course. But here she was training as a priest, and she needed to let go of the comforts of being one-on-one with a teacher and having pretty much not a supportive sangha, but to enter that container of training, of practice with other people that are at the same level as her as far as beginning training. And so you need, part of our practice is such an important piece, is that every member of the sangha, whether they're lay or priest, becomes your teacher. Why? Because we all have our ego issues. We all have our edges that come up. And the gift of practicing in that container, in that physical container with others, is that you see your stuff. You get to see your stuff come up. You get to see other people's stuff come up, usually before you see your own stuff come up, right? So, it's so obvious when it's somebody else that loses it in practice. They get upset, angry, they get anxious, all that stuff. You see that in somebody else real quickly. And it's much more difficult to notice it in yourself. It's very easy to blame somebody else, like, oh, you're not practicing right, etc. It's much more difficult to turn the light and, again, get that great big mirror and look at yourself, right? That's what our practice is. Take the judgment, right? We're dissolving. You don't just jump into non-judgmental awareness, right? This is a process. This is a process that happens through training. And I mean, you can drop judgment just like that, no doubt. But we have to continue it over time, right? It's one thing to drop judgment in the moment, and any of us can do that immediately. It's another thing to continue that over multiple moments through time. And that's where the practice comes in. It's not just a one-time thing, it's a continuity, and keep doing it. It requires some degree of effort to maintain. And we can lose it. All of us are susceptible, whether we've been practicing for 3 months or for 30 years, right? So in any case, my teacher, Diane Roshi, she had proven to herself as well as to her teacher that she could live in a relatively austere environment in a mountain, in a small circular hut, just 6 feet in diameter. She was able to maintain a difficult schedule that included hauling large stones to build the temple that he was in the process of building. She exhibited great strength and reliability as an individual, but she had not yet been tested in that communal environment. She was, in a sense, the embodiment of American self-reliance, and she excelled in that way. And yet, she had not been tested in working in a communal environment. So, when her grandfather teacher, Daishin Shimbi Daosho, or Daishin Shimbi Roshi, suggested that she go to train in Nagoya with a community of female priests. And Nagoya, keep in mind, is a big city like Tokyo. Her, she immediately gave a nonverbal protest. Here she was thinking, okay, I'm going to stay here on a mountain. My asthma has disappeared. I'm free from asthma, and I like this lifestyle. I'm strong. I can do it. So she non-verbally protested, and immediately her teacher Daito Roshi said, "You're going. You're going. You're going to go train with it. You're going to go to Nagoya. There's no question about it. You don't have a choice in the matter." And in a sense, this is one of the things that distinguishes priest from lay to a certain degree, is that if you commit to being a priest, then there is some understanding that you simply follow what the teacher says, not in a guru type relationship, but that's the practice. All right, you're actually looking for that. You're looking for your edges to come up. Whereas if you're practicing as a layperson, you have to juggle multiple things, and you have to be able to make your own choices. So in some ways, a priest lifestyle, you have to be ready, at least for a certain period of time with regards to your training, to completely drop your own choices, right? Your preferences, that is, not your choices, but your preferences. You choose to let go of preferences, at least for a time period while you're training with your teachers, so that because you want to transform, that's what you're asking for, that's what you're choosing. And so her teacher said, once Daishin Shimbi said, you should train with women priests in Nagoya, Daito Roshi said, "You're going." Right? So she didn't have it. It wasn't like he was asking her, "Do you want to go?" It was, "You're going." And so she then verbally protested. She said, "But my asthma is going to flare up if I go to Nagoya. I know how it is in the big city." And Daito Roshi's response was, "Make friends with your asthma." In other words, don't run away from this illness that you have. Learn how to live with it. Make friends with your asthma. And I heard that teaching from her when I was practicing with her, and it was just, for me, it hit me like an arrow in my heart, just boom. Make friends. You can replace that word asthma with whatever illness, whatever thing that is bothering you. So Diane Roshi was given a great koan in that moment. She didn't know how to make friends with her asthma. She knew how to run away from it. She knew how to escape it. She knew how to treat it to a certain degree, but she hadn't exactly made friends with it. And when I was practicing with her at Mount Equity Zendo, I witnessed so many days. We'd wake up early in the morning for meditation, and we sit from like 6 to 6:30, or that schedule. And she would come into the meditation hall, and I would be hearing on certain days, and it seemed to be certain seasons were worse than others. She would come into the meditation hall, and I could hear her wheezing. She could barely get air in, right? Because asthma closes up the lungs so that it makes it much more difficult to inhale. So she'd be, and I, of course, sitting in zazen, I looked at her, and I asked her, "Are you okay? Can I get you something? Do you need anything? What can I do?" And she would say, it's okay, don't worry, I sit Zazen, everything will be fine. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, wow, she sounds terrible. She sounds like she's dying. And I could feel that. I would just sit with that. But then she was really sitting with it. She would come sit down in Zazen, and I tell you, within 5 minutes, her breath would change and the asthma would disappear. And of course, there was a feeling on my side of relief, because when we're around people that are sick, usually, often the case, when we're around somebody who's sick, we want them to be better so that we feel better. It's not about them, right? We want them to, I mean, we might think it's about them. We want to make it about them, but actually it's about us. It's about us. We don't like to be around people when they're not feeling well. And again, this is all opportunities to look at ourselves in that great big mirror. But just to say that she had made friends with her asthma. That was what, 20, 30 years after Daito Roshi said that. Make friends with your asthma. She had done it. She had done it. She came, she sat Zazen. It's okay. I'm not going to. Now, she also used an inhaler. And as her asthma grew worse, she would use her inhaler more frequently. But for many, many, many mornings in meditation, she went without an inhaler. And her Zazen enabled her to relax the breath and get back to homeostasis. And I think that's what's happening when we're doing Zazen, and we're really letting go of the judgments. Right? On a profound level, we're coming back into homeostasis. So all of us have our edges. That we all have places that bring us to the immediacy of life and death. And for Diane Roshi, her own illness was tied to breathing. I mean, that is just such a important process. If there's not breath, there's not life. So I just love the image of the bright mirror. There were this great mirror, and further on in this fascicle of the Shobo Genzo, Dogen brings in a story. The first story is about a monk named Gayashata. And it says that when Gayashata was born, a clear, bright, round mirror was born together with him. Just think about that imagery, right? It doesn't make logical sense that a mirror was born together with him, right? That doesn't make sense. But there's obviously something much deeper trying to be transmitted by Dogen to us here about the mirror. And interestingly to me, the Chinese characters for round mirror are N-Con. The N in N-Con is the same N as in Dai N, my teacher's name. So Dai meaning great, N meaning round or great circle. So it's that same N. And again, it's pointing her, but it's really pointing all of us to take seriously the power of the great mirror, and to sit with that great mirror when we're practicing. That we're not bound by other people's judgments when we're sitting. We're not bound by our own internal judgments either. And this here is where our transformation really takes off. So, let's take a moment just to find the mirror. Pull the mirror up. Just like Gayashata. He was born and a mirror was simultaneously born with him. And the story goes on that the mirror followed him around until so wherever he went, there would be a round mirror following him. Sounds kind of sounds kind of, what's the story of the Greek mythology, the man who uh, looked in the mirror all the time?
Narcissus. Yeah.
Right, narcissist. Sound like a narcissist there. I don't think it's meant in that same train of thought as a narcissist. I think it's meant in the sense of that he had some kind of special awareness that he was able to simply reflect what was going on without attaching some judgment to it. And so he was naturally born free, like all of us. And at the same time, as the story concludes, there's a part of it where Gayashata, the mirror, when on the day that he's ordained as a priest, the mirror disappears. So the mirror is functioning in several very interesting ways for us and in our practice. I think what the story is, we need that mirror. We need that mirror when the judgments are there, whether they're internal or external. When the judgments are there, we need that mirror. But as we mature spiritually, we're going to still need that mirror. But as we mature spiritually, the mirror also dissolves. And so there's not this subject-object dualism present with the mirror. And we can simply sit. That's shikantaza, just sitting. We're not thinking about a mirror. We're not reflecting. We're just sitting. So that's a place for all of us to mature. Don't go right into dissolve the mirror. That's not the point either. But there's power in this metaphor of the mirror. And when we're in discursive thinking, we're not seeing the mirror. We're not seeing the mirror in front of us. But at the same time, Zen doesn't allow us to take root in one spot. So we have to be also careful about simply being in non-judgmental awareness. That's not going to be ultimately helpful either. That's not it. That's not nirvana. We have to also let go of that, and hence the dissolving of the mirror for Gayashata. So not to attach to the mirror, the beauty of that mirror, the narcissism in a sense of, oh, look, I have peace of mind. Not to attach to that peace of mind either, because sometimes we're just going to have to let it go and re-enter the world of duality and the world of judgment, the world of internal judgments, the world of external judgments. That's gonna be there for us. Zazen gives us a time to step away from it, and then we return back into it. But when we return back into it, we know that we're not caught by it. And that's the key, right? We're not going to get rid of those judgments, just like my teacher's not going to get rid of her asthma, but we can function with it from a different place. All right. So that's what I want to share today. Thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to your comments and thoughts on this. Thank you.
Anybody has any comments or questions for Daishin? Now's the time.
Yeah, and online too, please.
When we're sitting and we're with everybody in the Zendo, what do we train our mind to focus on in that moment?
Right. I mean, that's a wonderful place to be. To sit at, what are we putting our mind on in that moment? So there's a couple of ways, and it just depends on your particular mind. It depends on where you are in your mind. I don't want to say do this, do that, and then everybody does that. That's not, I don't think that's the way to go. but if I knew what your particular circumstances are, I could make suggestions here or there. But oftentimes for people just starting out, we really do need to know, where do we put our minds and where do we place our attention? And for that, starting out, the tip of the nose, right? Watching the breath go in and out is a great place. The abdomen. So when we're full of distractions, when there's lots of distractions in our head and lots of thoughts going up, we do have to employ technique, right? Zazen is not a technique. Shikantaza is not a technique. Yet we don't want to dispense with techniques, and we can drop the awareness if we're full of thoughts. We can drop our attention down into our abdomen, and the traditional place is the tanden, 2 finger widths below the navel. So you can place your attention down there, or you could place your awareness in the cosmic mudra, the tip of the thumbs, right? You don't want to push the thumbs together like this. You're not pushing the thumbs together, right? But just a very light touching, or not even touching, just so that something the width of a piece of paper could go through your thumbs. I want to just feel that subtle sensation. And I love my preference, actually, for me personally, focus on body sensations, right? Keep the physical body, at least 50% of your awareness on the physical body, at least 50% of your awareness on the physical body. And then the other 50% on your surroundings. And your senses will, let your senses operate freely. The ears, let the ears operate freely, let the eyes operate freely. We leave the eyes open. So there's this soft focus. That's the key, is not to focus on one particular point when we're meditating. And that can also derail us. If we focus on one point with our eyes, that can derail our practice. So, and because we're fixating, it's fixating. So open the awareness and take it all in. That's the beginning of shikantaza, is taking that all in. All right, not fixating on one thing. We're not fixating on the mirror, not fixating on a koan, but just open awareness. But sometimes we need to anchor ourselves first. And that's where focusing on a koan could be helpful. Focusing on down in the tanden, right, or the cosmic mudra, that can be an initial anchor, just to begin to shake off the obsessive nature of thinking. But at some point we can let go of that technique and simply rest. And it also requires a certain degree of trust. I mean, you want to know that you're sitting in a safe container, that if everybody's practicing together, that's a really safe place to be sitting. Right? Everybody's doing their own thing. We're not trying to judge one another. That's where the non-judgment comes in. We're focusing on our own practice. And so when we're sitting in a container like that, it also facilitates the opening of awareness, so that we're not fixating on something. Anyways, that's just some thoughts on that. Without knowing each person's issues, I hesitate to say that you should do that, but I do want to encourage you to perhaps think about Zazen as first grounding, first rooting yourself, and then shikantaza, right? So give yourself the time to let go of those thoughts and then open awareness, if that makes sense. I don't know. Anyways, I say that, and then somebody's situation might not be appropriate. So just take that with a grain of salt and experiment.
Daishin, could you define shikantaza?
Great. Right, yeah. It eludes definition. Because as soon as we start to define it, it limits what we're doing. So we're not doing shikantaza. All right. As soon as we say I'm doing shikantaza, it's creating separation. There's nothing we're doing. There's absolutely zero that we're doing. Right. And I'm just trying to get us off of these ideas about I'm going to meditate. Right. As soon as we try to grasp onto, okay, here's what I'm doing, we're off we're off base with shikan when it comes to shikantaza. But again, sometimes we need to anchor ourselves, right? So we do that. We settle ourselves down, and then right. So shikan taza literally means just sitting. Shikan, just, taza, sitting. Za is for zazen. So it's not employing something in particular. It's really returning it's returning to who we are already, beyond techniques, beyond somebody else's ideas, beyond our ideas. And Dogen's real elusive about defining it in his Fukan Zazengi. He says it's not meditation practice in one place, and there's other statements he makes about it that prevent us from kind of trying to land on something. And to be honest with you, in my own practice, my teacher didn't. To me, it came from sitting with my teacher. So she taught us when she first would teach meditation. She would teach us counting our breath, but then she would say, after weeks or months or years of sitting with her regularly, and in my case it was, I sat with her every day, but during sesshin especially, she would say things like, eventually you can dispense with the breathing, you can dispense with following your breath. In fact, you don't even have to try to dispense with it. In something like a sesshin, what we're doing next month, it will naturally, you won't be able to, you won't be able to think about your breath. You just you just open, and it's not something that we can control. So I guess that's what I want to come at it from. It's not. Suzuki Roshi was asked one time about how to do zazen, and he said, you don't do zazen, zazen does zazen. Right? That's the ultimate releasing of effort. And at the same time, we put some effort into it. So it's this non-dual is maybe the best way I can explain it, but it's an experience. It's not an intellectual activity. And I would strongly encourage you to, if you want that, we all want that. We all desire we want to experience the magic of our true nature, and Zen practice facilitates that in a profound way. And it doesn't happen by our intellectual efforts, although that does not mean we shouldn't study or engage our intellect. It just means that we have this wonderful practice that opens us up when the conditions are right. Just like, ask a flower how it blooms. It's responding to the causes and conditions in the myriad causes and conditions. It's not doing and human beings are human. We're human flowers. We're just, when the conditions are right, we open. So I would encourage it. Next month in April, we have our Buddha's birthday sesshin. Even if you can't commit to Friday, Saturday, Sunday sitting, even if you can come for a segment, like a 1-hour segment, a 3-hour segment, in the morning, in the evening, in the afternoon, some segment of sitting, all of this adds to our awakening, our opening. Yeah. So just that's a punch there for taking on the sesshin, because it's not easy. It's not an easy practice, but we need that challenge too. We need that challenge right? Certain flowers only open when they're or certain seeds only develop under great heat or pressure. Certain seeds, like there's a certain pine tree that requires the burning, the fire, in order to sprout. And all of us are different. We come from different life circumstances. So whatever your background is, we don't want to, our background is going to, our past history is present. And if we've suffered a lot, it might not, and we're in this sacred container that's facilitating our awakening, and you're really practicing with that great mirror, boom, you could wake up really quickly.
Daishin, one teacher when I was at Hokyoji described Zazen. He said, Zazen teaches Zazen. Your job is just to keep the cushion warm.
That's great.
I like that idea that Zazen teaches Zazen. Every moment is a new experience. You're learning something new about yourself and the universe, moment after moment after moment. There's kind of a mindfulness to it.
Right, yeah.
Your job is just to keep the cushion warm.
Yeah, right. And there's some part of our mind that's like, but I wanna claim this in some way. But that's the beauty of this practice. Sawaki Kodo Roshi said something like, Zazen does Zazen with Zazen. Something like that, right? Just doesn't let the ego to come into the play there.
And if I could just, and everything that you were talking about, how like we can't dispense with technique, and but it's hard to know, like it's hard to comment on somebody's practice without knowing like where they are and what's happening for them internally while they're sitting. And so I just wanted, like for me, often what it looks like in any given sitting period is that it's kind of a cyclical nature. Is once I start realizing that I'm caught up in discursive thinking, and you can tell because you're just in your head. I think everyone knows what that feels like. And so once you catch that immediately, that's when the technique can come in, because you can stop it and anchor yourself in whatever you choose. Daishin had mentioned the tip of the nose, or it can be just the sensation of breathing, or just the feeling of your bottom on whatever it is. You can just do that, and then pretty quickly you can transition back into that open focus awareness, where he was saying that you have like 50% in your body, kind of 50% of like the space around you, and that's really all. That's pretty much all that we have control over, is like just the practicing of being more comfortable in that spacious awareness, and then when you start talking about shikantaza on top of it, like that's a really kind of a if whatever happens in that space of open focus awareness is really kind of none of your business. But you're just meeting everything as it comes up. But you do, and then eventually you might get sucked back into discursive thinking again. Then you have to anchor yourself again. But that's kind of what it's like for me. Is you're just trying to be aware as much as you can of what your mind, what's happening in your mind, and you're not trying to narrow your focus so much on being so kind of obsessed with your own thoughts, I guess.
Yeah.
I like the word anchor that you used. I always think of, the breath as an anchor that when you start floating away can, kind of serve as a foundation to bring you back. You come back to
Absolutely.
your focus in on it. You're just there with it, and then, like you said, open up again.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many teachings of the Buddha on the breath. I love the Anapanasati Sutta. It's a early teaching of Buddhism where the Buddha gives explicit instruction on where to place your mind, or I don't like to use that word mind because we think up here, but where to place your attention. And there's 16 exercises on where to place your attention that are connected with breathing. And we are inheritors of the Anapanasati Sutta and other earlier sutras like that. We should avail ourselves, we should study, how did the Buddha do this? So this is also a plug for, don't think Shikantaza only deepens when we study the Buddha's teachings, the earlier Buddha's teachings. Our Shikantaza will also benefit from that. It will, it's meant to be a culmination. Shikantaza is meant to be, I think of it sometimes as a culmination of all of the Buddha's teachings. But it's good to know what those Buddha's teachings are. And when you study those teachings and you practice them, like the anapana, breathing in, breathing out, anapana, mindfulness, sati, anapana sati. When you study this intellectually and then practice it, you're watering those seeds within you, and it affects shikantaza. So don't get stuck in a particular method. Shikantaza is not a method, but don't get stuck in a particular teaching of the Buddha, but do study them, because it will deepen your experience in the Zendo. And it could also be these teachings, and we do have to be discerning and discriminating when we're studying earlier teachings of the Buddha, because they may not all be appropriate. We don't want to just blindly accept what the Buddha taught. We don't want to blindly accept what Dogen taught. We need to know some historical context. So that can help too. But there are certain practices, earlier practices, that can be very helpful.
Hi everybody. I'm sick. I had a couple of things to share, if that's okay. Okay, great. So I wanted to talk about how someone asked, like, where do we put our mind when we sit zazen? And my opinion on that is kind of just like let it be, like where it's at. Kind of like I like to use a metaphor, like if we have a cat or dog that has like a lot of energy and is like doing like zoomies and running around, eventually it'll like wear all of its energy out and just like get tired and like kind of become still and slow down. So I feel like zazen for me is more about like that observation aspect of things. And then I've never heard of shikantaza before, but it reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend one time where we were talking about like they're like they know about like math and science and stuff, and they talked about how when physics and like calculus try to define a singularity, then you start like dividing things by zero, and overall the math just kind of doesn't add up or really make sense. So just kind of reminds me of like trying to describe something with words is kind of that equivalent to trying to describe that singularity with like math. Like it can't really be tangibly understood in a certain way. So that's all.
Thank you, Whitney. I'm sorry your voice is shot there, and I hope you get better soon. I love that image you gave, though, but trying to divide things by zero. How do you do that? All right. I think that's a nice image for shikantaza. We're trying to divide by zero.
If there's no one else, wrap it up.
We'll do informal dismissal.
Okay.
Are we putting our cushions back first?
Oh no, we'll do it here.
Okay.
We'll need your sutra books, page 2.
Bottom of page 2. May this merit extend universally to all, so that we together with all beings realize the Buddha way.
Beings are numberless. I vow to freedom. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma we could return our cushions where we were before, and we'll bow out.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everybody at the Zen Center. Well, take good care. Thanks for your efforts and your work there. Everybody online too. Don't forget the practice of washing the dishes. All right, and soon we'll have a garden to play in too.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Take care. Mark, Ryan, Dan, Lisa, Chris, Anita. All right, everybody else there.
We'll just do a standing bow. Two bows,
Okay.
yeah. Just bow out.